Events happen that change our lives. Dealing with change is what we do. We discuss with industry professionals objective solutions to work through cherished items and family memories. When we go beyond the gavel, we provide tools and information to deal with these crisis times. Hello, I'm Shane Feely with Auction Solutions. I'm so excited to have Teresa Jordan with Care Matrix here with us today as we're talking about all of the things that we need to do to get our loved ones who may be elderly or may need some special care from their house to a new location and a new facility. Teresa, thanks for coming out.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. So in your course of business, we've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years. What is the first question that people ask you when they finally make the decision to call?
It's 2 parts. First of all, it is what exactly do you do? Because we're a new niche in the market. And so what we say is we are senior navigators and we navigate the senior housing landscape. So people are like, oh, you're like a real estate agent for assisted living. And that's exactly right. The second question is, how much does this cost me? And we are actually free. We get a referral fee from the community when you move in.
Okay. So how does the process begin? I call you and I say, Teresa, my mom is thinking about relocating to an apartment or a senior living facility. Mm-hmm. What do you do? Take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Process is very easy, Shane. The first thing we do is we like to meet with the loved one or whomever is the power of attorney and ask questions about really what it is that they're needing. And it's not, everyone's like, oh, it's a physical and financial thing, and it's more than that. So we want to know what's going on financially as well as physical, but we want to know about their spiritual and their well-being and their social, because those 3 things are super important as we age. So that takes about 30 minutes. Because we really want to get in depth and make sure we have facts so we can really help pair the right community with for the loved one. After that, it goes really slick. We have a database of all of the communities. That database talks about services offered and not offered, because assisted livings are not apples to apples.
I believe that.
And it also talks about what their price point is. And it also talks about if they offer Medicaid waiver and all the guidelines around that. We then, once we have identified 2 to 3 options, we will then set up tours and go with you on those tours.
Nice.
Yeah, our role on that tour is not to influence you. We're there to make sure that we're asking questions about care. A lot of people go to an assisted living around the corner or an independent living that's right around the corner, and they get excited about ice cream machines and
Sure.
pubs, and it's really about care. If they don't have care, all the ice cream in the world does not make a difference. So we're asking a lot of questions about care. Our role on that tour is really 2 things. We're there to educate and provide options. Again, we're not there to influence. It's when you decide on where you're going to move, then we handhold you through move-in. And one of the things we do is a lot of people need movers. They need some, what am I going to do with all of this stuff?
All my stuff.
And sometimes an attorney is needed. And so what we do is we help people match up the right service with what their needs are. We never ever get a kickback or a referral fee from a service that we refer to. We're only referring to people that are doing a good job. So that's the process in a nutshell. We then do follow-ups to make sure everything is going okay.
Okay. I know as an auctioneer, you asked me to go out and take a look at someone who was relocating about 50 miles outside of Omaha, mm-hmm. and I went out and I talked to them, and it was kind of interesting to listen to your process and what they had to say, because I believe you were in the financial investigation portion of what mm-hmm. was going on to make sure that wherever they went, they were going to be able to stay there for the longest time and get mm-hmm. the best care as long as they were independent living. Is that a pretty good part of it, or?
Thank you for bringing that up, because let's be honest, financials are important. One of the questions we get is, how much is assisted living these days? And I'll tell you, it all depends on if it's a single person or a couple. If you're single, it's probably around $4,500. If you're a couple, it's probably around $5,500 to $6,000. And so financials do play a very, very important part. And by the way, what I quoted was average.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right? So financials are important. You don't want to spend all of your money and then have to move again. And so we really do look at overall financials, and we don't get into bank accounts and to the penny, but really what is the overall assets, and where's the right place to go so you can stay there
for the longest time. So do some of your customers ask for just assisted living or independent living, or do they ask for some place that has a step program where you're independent, then assisted, then
that continuum
skilled
of care?
Sure.
Yeah, so when we're doing that assessment, that's part of what we're looking at. A lot of times people are on that border of independent and assisted living, and so we have a discussion with them, and part of it's financial, right? Can we put them in independent living and maybe put services around them, and so they can stay there longer and save money? Sometimes it's, do you want to move twice in maybe under a year because they're on that border? So we have a lot of discussions with them when we ask questions around that. A lot of times people have a disease state, and so they're like, you know what, I'm just planning. So we want to make sure we have that continuum of care. So there's just a lot of things to think about before you jump into the decision-making process and go down the road.
And hopefully they've been to an attorney and have their will and all those things done, and everybody's pretty on board with what they need to do. What do you do when you walk into a family, and how do you handle walking into a family that maybe isn't ready for mom and dad to make this, or have been ready for mom and dad to make this, and now they all have an opinion?
So there's multiple questions there.
Yeah.
So first of all, if they're not ready to go, we're not going to push you. Let's talk about staying safe at home, but we also want to plan, because if a crisis does happen, we want you to have a plan so you're not making a decision in another crisis mode. So we talk about that. There are lots of families that have lots of family members with lots of different ideas and thoughts around it. Always bringing in a third party is always a good idea, because you're neutral. You don't have an idea on one way or the other. You listen to facts, and then you can give them information, and they can make decisions. I have enough experience that I usually can tell what their trajectory is going to be.
Sure.
And so just give them the insight to that. Again, I'm not there to tell them what to do. I'm there to help guide. Did I answer all those questions?
You did.
Okay,
you
good,
did.
good.
Even the contentious. So what do you do? How do you handle the difficult family member that says, no, I'm just going to stay here with mom? Do you continue to plan just in case mom gets to a point where that family member cannot handle them?
We do. And it becomes, usually there's, let's say, 6 children, and there's one that says, you know what, I just want to stay. I'm going to stay with mom. I don't want to spend that kind of money. I can be there. And you know what? That's wonderful. What a gift. But we also have to be realistic, because there's burnout. There's special skills, especially if you're talking about dementia. Even just lifting and bathing they're all special skills.
Sure.
So we always want to plan, and if that helps, if that is part of the process for that one sibling, then that's the way we go. But
Sure.
it also has to be every sibling's decision, not just one. And we work through that.
It's very much easier if they have all agreed, or at least have an idea of where they want to go with it. Because we've talked earlier about the only discussion that you don't have is the one that you need to have, and that is, what are we going to do next?
Right.
And we've also talked in some of our other shows about the parents having little secrets, and they're getting along so well with their little secrets, and then all of a sudden it kind of blows up a little bit when one passes.
Yeah. Well, and even just, especially people with dementia, they can mask things very, very well if they're in their own environment. So you may think they're doing better than what they actually are. Also, when it's a couple, usually one's doing great physically and the other one is not, and then one is usually doing great mentally,
Right.
and the other one is not. And so the two of them together make a great whole, one person, but they're compensating for each other.
Sure.
And and what happens, with those instances, we really want to plan, because if one has to go to the hospital, there's now a hole or a gap, and it becomes a crisis situation. So when a couple is like, you know what, we're doing great at home, again, we have that discussion about let's see what we can do to keep you safe at home, and let's have an alternative plan just in case something happens.
So how quickly are you able to react if there is a crisis? Say there's a broken hip and the hospital and everybody's there and they have to make those decisions, and generally a little more under pressure than having to talk or being able to talk to you ahead of time and plan. How does that generally go for you?
So we have placed somebody within 4 hours.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but it's all up to the family. If they want to do it fast, we do it fast. If they want to take their time, we take their time. But it's really about you. It's not about us.
Sure.
You know, what normally happens is somebody calls, they're in the hospital. What we do is if their loved one is able, and it does not make them anxious for us to come and visit, we can always come. We'd like to meet the person.
Oh, sure.
But if that's not possible, we will talk to adult children in the hospital, and we just start giving them things to think about. Because usually when somebody's in the hospital, they're going to go to rehab, and we can talk about that process as well, and talk about insurance, all that good stuff. But we like to start planning, because rehab can be, usually it's around 21 days, but it can be a lot shorter.
Sure.
So we want them to be prepared. We don't want them to have, again, another crisis.
Yeah.
We're all about mitigating those crises in our life.
Yeah, I think that the toughest part of having someone in these situations of our parents is that when it happens so fast, and everybody's on the phone, and all of a sudden everybody's there with their emotions, and it can really cause 2 or 3 days of real chaos and crisis when you need to be taking care of, the loved one. It's a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. And so we tell our clients, if somebody goes in the hospital, give us a call immediately, because we can help navigate that whole process. Just things, again, to think about. It's because you're in a crisis mode, your brain doesn't always work that way, right? It's not thinking always logical and, oh my gosh, what do we need to do next? Just give us a call, and we can help walk through that. And also, hospital social workers are gems. They're lovely people.
They are.
Very smart and intelligent, and they're your best friend.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So when would I call you? Let's just say I'm talking to Mom and she's thinking about moving somewhere. When would I call you? Then, when she's talking about it, or how early?
We will come whenever you call, and really, loved ones usually know their parents best. But when they're in the mood is a great time to start talking. It doesn't mean we have to do anything. It's sometimes it's that education. A lot of times what this generation knows is nursing homes back in the 1950s. They were very clinical, very sterile, and so it's very, assisted living is a scary concept. They don't understand how amazing they are. They're mini resorts, if you will.
Sure.
So sometimes it's just, educating them and saying, why don't we go on a tour so you can just see what it's about. And for them to see what they have to offer sometimes starts that. Again, we're going to talk about, if it's not time, that's great, but how can we keep you safe at home?
Sure.
And it's always planning and, again, mitigating that crisis.
Okay, so keeping them safe at home, then would you reach out to someone who might have to put a hand grab in the restroom or things like that while they're walking through this process of making their decisions? Or
you bet. So we talk about several things. Sometimes it's bringing private duty or what we call home care in. It's that non-medical companion care. What are their needs? That's why we do the assessment, because we really need to understand what their needs are. Maybe it's home health, the medical side of it. Maybe they need some nursing on top of that. Bringing in a home health company to do even a home assessment to see where they need grab bars. Bringing in a construction company that will actually has time that will come in and place those grab bars. Maybe it's a pendant, so in case they fall. It really all depends upon who they are, what their needs are. There are certain services out there. Eastern Nebraska on Aging, sometimes referred to INAWA, has a lot of great resources. So sometimes we can reach out to them. the VA, if somebody's a veteran, they may even have, or they may be eligible for resources through them.
Absolutely. No, those are great ideas. What is your biggest challenge?
You know, I might not be answering this, but the biggest challenge for me is, and I guess it's more of something that really tugs on my heart, and that is when people haven't planned and we're now in crisis mode and they don't have their power of attorney, they don't have their wills, finances may be a real big issue. And when you're in a crisis mode and you have all of that happening, you need to act fast, and you can't.
Sure.
Because things aren't in place. And so I love to help people. That's why I'm in this business. I'm a caregiver myself, and so I understand what caregivers are going through, and I want to help. And when I can't help because my hands are tied, that's the hardest. That's
Right.
the hardest.
So some of your suggestions would be what we've been over before. Have your will in place. Know who your power of attorneys are going to be. And some families have one for medical and one for financial. Absolutely. And if you decide to do a trust, get that in place, and make sure that, some older people I have found when I walk into a home have just stuffed all their envelopes in bags.
Yeah.
So their finances are a total wreck.
Yeah.
So do you go through all of that?
We personally don't. There are services out there that we reach out to help with that. The other thing too is since we're talking about finances, if financials are strapped, if they're very tight, you definitely have to plan. Definitely, there are resources in Omaha, but they're not as many, and so you want to make sure that you get on wait lists prior to even a need happening.
Well, that's another question. How long does it take to get into some of these facilities that can provide the care that our loved ones need?
If you are open to the city of Omaha, it's generally not usually an issue. But if you have a certain demographic area that you have to stay in, you want to plan, because sometimes there are openings, but usually when you have a need, they're full. Right? It always happens that way.
Yeah.
So it's people think, oh my gosh, I have to be on a wait list for a year, and that's really not the case. Usually there's openings, or we can create a plan to make sure that you get in.
Oh, sure. I know my uncle was from a small town in Nebraska, and we moved him to Manual because my dad really wanted to spend time with him. He had had a massive stroke. And they spent as much time as they could together, but there came a point where my uncle was just not happy in Omaha anymore, and it did take time to get him out to a small town in Nebraska where he was by his kids and where he wanted to be. The level of care was different there too.
Yes.
Than it was.
We are so fortunate in Omaha because we have a lot of great options. And I think that's one of our value adds, is not only understanding who's doing a great job, and also what are those little nuances that you need to think about when you're choosing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what else? Tell me something new in your industry that we need to know about.
First of all, insurance is always changing. Always changing. And one thing, it's not so much in the assisted living arena, but it's when people need rehab, and because we're coming on to, it's time for open enrollment for insurance for Medicare here pretty soon. One of the things I always tell people is understand where you want to go for rehab and ask what insurances they accept and don't accept. So if you if you need to go to rehab, that way you know that you're able to go where you want to go because they accept your insurance. So that's one little trip for this time of year.
No kidding.
Yeah, just know that. But as an industry, we are evolving, and it's really fun to watch. It's no longer, hey, we play bingo, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
They're going to plays. They're bringing in professors from UNO to do lecture series and have discussions, and it's fun to watch it evolve.
That's really nice, because I remember when my great-grandfather was in a nursing home out in a small town, Nebraska, and it was white sheets, white everything. His hair was white, and his little pink face was all you could see. So it is different, and I know that when I walk in, there's a feeling of friendliness and welcomeness, which is
Yeah.
something that you didn't experience back then.
No, assisted livings are really a home away from home. You have, I'm talking about a 1-bedroom, so you have a kitchenette which consists of a refrigerator, a microwave, a sink, and some cupboards. There are no stoves because you get 3 meals a day and they're fabulous. You have a living room and a bedroom, so
Sure.
it's an apartment, and very homey, comfortable, and usually very beautiful.
I would think with a stove, you know, when you've lost someone and then you've relocated, there might be a little bit of depression that would go along with that. I would think that if I had a stove, I probably wouldn't cook. If I couldn't open it or peel it, I probably wouldn't eat anything at all.
Well, you know what I run into is a lot of ladies, and I don't mean to stereotype, but that's just that generation, right? They're like, I have cooked for 50 years,
Sure.
I'm done.
That's right.
And I'm like, I'm right there with you. And so, you know, it's restaurant style. You can go in and have breakfast made to order, and then lunch is usually 2 options plus a a la carte menu if you don't like the 2 options. A lot of them have chefs.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a totally different game than it was 50 years ago, and it's just going to evolve even more.
I noticed that we've been getting some calls as an auction company because some of the assisted living or independent livings are remodeling the whole thing and making it even more welcoming to people,
Yes.
modernizing and things like that. And I think that is great. They are amazing when they're finished.
Yes, they really are. And I'll tell you, there are some that remodel or update every 5 to 7 years.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot. It's frequently.
Yes. Well, because, you know, they get a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And they want to keep them fresh and inviting and home-like.
Man, that is great. It's nice that they're doing all those things because the thought of nursing home to our generation of
Yes.
parents is just like, yeah, no, they don't even want to talk about it. And I think that was part of it, was the industrial type of process that was going on when they were visiting people.
Definitely. In fact, I just had a family I was working with in this last month, and the mom was like, I visited my great aunt in the nursing home, and she was telling me the stories, and I had to say, you know what, that would be horrible, but guess what? It's not like that anymore. Let's go on a tour so you can see. And her eyes were opened and her fears were calmed down.
Oh, that's great. And they also have rehabilitation while they're there. They have gymnastics programs, and where even those that can sit in a chair can just exercise and keep keep moving, which is so important to keeping them, in a healthy mindset.
Yes. Exercise is so important throughout our life, right? Just not as we age, throughout our life.
Absolutely.
But one thing that people discount is social. Being social is so important, and people are like, I told Mom I would keep her in our house, as long as I could. And what happens is they start isolating, especially over winter, and that brings on depression, and then that brings on some other health issues. So it's amazing when people go into assisted living, independent living. They're getting 3 meals a day, they're getting their meds taken on time, and they're getting that socialization, and they just blossom.
Well, I'll tell you, there was nothing more of a challenge than to sit down with my dad's pill box and put in 35 pills a day that he had to take. And then sometimes he'd get mad and stop taking them, and he'd have to start all over again. And it was, I can imagine how that would make people's lives easier.
Right. We usually, and again, don't mean to stereotype, but we deal a lot with adult daughters. And adult daughters these days, they are working a full-time job, have kids of their own, and they're trying to balance everything on top of trying to help Mom and Dad. And there are a lot of things out there before it's time for assisted living that we can help work. Again, it's creating that plan. What can we do now? What can we do in 2 years? We love to work with people and plan, because if we can plan, again, it mitigates that crisis. Things are ready to go when you need it.
Well, great.
Yeah.
So, Teresa, how am I going to get a hold of you? Where do I look in the phone book under Care Matrix?
We actually are not in the phone book because we are
No
mobile.
phone books anymore.
No, we're mobile. So
Google.
Yeah, exactly. So our phone number is 402-885-5693.
Okay.
That is a direct line to me, and again, Teresa Jordan. And you can email me at Teresa, that's Teresa, at carematrix, and we're .net. And our website is carematrix.net.
Great. So, and now, is that some kind of a franchise or something that you started on your own, or?
We are not franchised. I started this business over 5 years ago on my own. Again, I'm that caregiver, and I'm like, what can I do to help? And this was right up the alley. Caregivers really have a lot of emotions, a lot of different emotions, and I get those emotions. So I feel very blessed that I get to help people and help them get to a better spot, if you will.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Teresa, for
Thank
coming
you.
in today and being on the show. It's really nice to talk behind the gavel and find out what people are doing and how they're getting their people into a better place so that they don't have to worry as much. Thank you again.
Thank you.